When we get to heaven, each one of us will be kind of looking to, there's a favorite person in the Bible that each one of us wants to kind of catch up with. And I would like to catch up with Mark. Mark, I want to let you know that I really appreciate all the writings that you did. And they put it in a book. And Mark said, what was the book's name? And we'll say Bible, What was it titled? Mark, But I really enjoyed things of which, in our story today is, Mark listed 3 things in a row of which it was tough to be human. It actually starts over, if you want to follow along, it starts with Mark 4, verse 1. And again he began to teach by the sea, and a great multitude was gathered to him. So he got into a boat and sat on the sea, and the whole multitude was on the land facing him. So here's Jesus sitting in the boat, speaking to everybody. And it says, on the same day, verse 35, when evening had come, he said to them, let's cross over to the other side. Now the boat, it was interesting that he said, and when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was, and with other little boats also with him. Let's go to the other side. So I don't know what size this boat was. It was fairly large, I'm sure. And so they started across the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee is not that really wide. It's only about 8 miles at the very widest part. 171 feet at the deepest part of the Sea of Galilee. It says the average depth of the Sea of Galilee is about 60 foot. And so as they started out and they got, I don't know if they were rowing or if they were sailing, but anyway, a strong wind came up. These were professional fishermen who had spent their life on the sea. This little sea, Sea of Galilee, the lowest in elevation freshwater sea on earth is the Sea of Galilee. Second only to the lowest sea on earth that is saltwater is the Dead Sea. When the wind started blowing and the waves started coming over the side of the boat and this, that, and the other, and they had been through this before, but nothing like this. And they saw the futility of them surviving. And when they saw this, it was tough to be human. They looked and they found Jesus asleep on the pillow up in the front of the boat. And here they had spent all this time just simply trying to be alive, and he was asleep. And they went to him, and they woke him up. In Luke, it says master. In Mark, it says teacher. Don't you care that we're dying? Don't you care that we are dying? Jesus looks around peace, be still. And all of a sudden, the water was as smooth as a mirror. And then he looks at them and he says, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" It was tough to be human. They continue on to the other side. Mark continues right on with that. They continue to the other side, and the boat pulls up to the shore on the other side, and the disciples know, oh no. Here comes the man running out of the tombs, naked. They had tried to contain him with chains. They had tried to contain him with all kinds of things. And he would just simply break them. And at night, he would be screaming in the cemetery where he was living, and people were terrified. And here he comes, running toward Jesus. It said when Jesus left the boat. It doesn't say when the disciples left the boat. They probably were still on the boat and sent Jesus out, because here he comes. And he fell at the feet of Jesus, because here was a human being who was tormented with evil spirits, and it was tough to be human. And he fell at Jesus' feet. And I guess it was the Spirit that was speaking through him. And he cried out with a loud voice, "What I have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." This doesn't sound like the fellow who come running out of the thing. Jesus had already said to this evil spirits, "Come out of him." And so this was the response. We know the story of spirits asked to go, don't send us away, and so they chose another avenue, and all the pigs ran into the sea. And the farmers ran to town to tell everybody, what had happened. And they come rushing out. And when they got there, they found this human being who had been so tormented, whose life was so tough, sitting there at the feet of Jesus, fully clothed, listening to what he had to say. Oh, they were afraid. They asked Jesus to leave the country. And what did he do? He says, "Please let me go with you. Please let me follow you. I want to go with you." Jesus said, "No, I want you to go back to your home, and I want you to tell everyone what has happened to you." They get in the boat. This time, it's a better trip. They go back to the other side. Whole crowd is waiting on them at the other side. Jesus gets out of the boat, and here comes a ruler of the synagogue, Jairus. Now, Jairus' job as ruler of the synagogue was similar to our friend Shelton's job as head elder of the church. And folks, pray for him because he's doing a great job. You can tell because he asked me to preach today. It's hard. It's hard. I have been head elder, and Terry's been head elder, and probably Tony's been head elder when there was no pastor, and we know it's hard. And when he came to Jesus, he fell at his feet and asked him, "My little 12-year-old daughter, the only child we've got, is dying. Would you come and just lay your hands on her and save her?" Ruler of the synagogue, falling on his face in front of Jesus. It was tough to be human. Jesus said, "Sure, let's go." So they start out with the crowd, bumping. Jairus is so excited because they're finally on their way to his house, and he feels sure that if Jesus gets there, his daughter will live. But in the crowd was a lady who had been plagued with a hemorrhagic condition for 12 years. She had spent all of her money with every physician, with everything she possibly could, and now she was totally at wit's end. She had heard about Jesus, and finally in her mind she says, if I can just get close enough to touch the hem of his garment, I will be made well. So she started following in the crowd, and finally working her way up close enough, and finally, bump, she reached out and touched his garment. She turned around and she walked away, because at that moment she felt that she was cured. Jesus stopped. Who touched me? This was the same ones who woke him up in the boat and said, do you not care if you're going? We're drowning. And they looked at him and they said, the crowd's, everybody's bumping. Everybody's touching everybody. Oh, he said, I felt like there was healing without of me. And he started looking around. Can you imagine? Can you only possibly imagine Jairus thinking, why do we have to stop? We're going to my house. My daughter's going to die. Why? And he starts looking around. Who touched me? And finally, she realized that she needed to come and confess to him. If you notice in this story, he never, ever mentioned to her the problem of which she had had for 12 years. But whenever she came and told him what it was, he said to her, go home. Your faith has made you whole. And so she is ready now to go home. But at the same time, here comes somebody to speak to Jairus. And look carefully as to what they said to Jairus. Don't bother the teacher. The teacher. Where did Jesus spend a lot of his time on Sabbath? Was teaching in the synagogue. I'm sure he and Jairus had many times met one another, and Jairus had heard him teach many times. Don't bother the teacher anymore. because your daughter is dead. As soon as Jesus, this is verse 36 of chapter 5, as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, the shortest sermon probably that Jesus ever preached while he was on earth. Do not be afraid. Only believe. Do not be afraid. Only believe. Come on, Jairus, let's go on to your house. And so they went on to the house. Now, the professional mourners were there. They were professional. They had done this. This was their job. And all the mourning that was going on, Jesus said to them, why are you mourning? She's only asleep. And they ridiculed him because they were professional and they knew death when they had seen it. Jesus asked him, please leave the house. Please leave the house. And he took the father and the mother and Peter, James, and John. And they went in, and he walked up to the bedside, and he said, little girl, I say to you, arise. She got up. She started walking around. Now then, being human was not quite as tough for Jairus as it was him laying there on the ground in front of all the people asking Jesus to come. And the reason I like this so well is that Jesus was so much a person. He was so much a human that when the 12-year-old girl got up and started walking around and this, that, and the other, he said, why don't you give her something to eat? What more appropriate thing for a 12-year-old could he say? Give her something to eat, you know. I don't know what your experience has been. Your experience can be a death. Oh, how many of us here in this room have experienced that? Your experience can be a relationship that just went wrong. Your experience can be health, and the day that you go to the hospital, the doctor and whatever, and you hear those three famous words, you have cancer. It is tough to be human. Jesus did not leave us there with toughness to be human. One of the most precious things that I think we need to hear and to hold on to when life is tough. Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions, and if it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. And where I go, you know, and you know the way. Do not fear, only believe.